Hi my friend and welcome to the channel. I am Richard Genders and you are watching Genders Gaming, a channel dedicated for analog games. And today I am going to show you a game from Steam Forge Games with beautiful little miniatures that just want you to sit down and play around with them all day. I am talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. This is a 1 to 4 player game. And this is the base game. There are other expansions to this game as well, but I am going to show you the base game in this video. This game is about you heading out into the world trying to capture and hunt down these beast robots roaming the land. You are a hunter, you need to get the right equipment, you need to do your homework to trap these beasts. Today I'm going to show you the setup of the game and I'm going to show you the gameplay of the game and how to play it. So let's just have a look at it. At the start of the game, each player should choose a hunter that they would like to portray as. And also take their corresponding trait card. I will tell you more about this later. On the top of the trait track, you place your character's little symbol token. It should be placed on start. As you go up in level, you will move this down on the track, making your hunter stronger and stronger. And there's starting resources. This hunter here starts with 1 metal shard. Then we also need to take this hunter's starting equipment. And you can see that this is starting equipment because it has a 0 where the equipment level is. And you can also see which type of equipment it is out in the left corner. This is a bow, this is a spear, and this down here is an armor. On the right corner you can see a symbol matching to your hunter's profile, meaning that this equipment here is this hunter's starting equipment. On the equipment we also have some gray areas. These represent where to place that equipment. So the right bow here should obviously be to the right and the left one on the left side. You can only have 1 of these in each spot. So if you change the equipment, this needs to go away to fit the new one. We also need to take the hunter's starting cards. Again, you can see the hunter symbol up in the right corner and the 0 indicating that this is the starting gear. These cards will be your deck that you will play to make the actions, but it will also be your life. And when this runs out, well, this hunter will faint. The youngest or more unexperienced player take the fledgling token and place it in front of them. The oldest or more experienced player takes the leader token and place that in front of them. Then each player also needs to take their corresponding miniature. When the players have set up their characters, it's time for us to set up the different decks. We start by choosing a quest. In the base game, you only have the Sawtooth as a possible quest, but as you get more expansions, you will get more quests. Then we need to shuffle the event deck that looks like this. This will impact the different players during the different phases of the game. Put it face down in the gaming area. We also shuffle the salvage deck. These are different resources that we can use to acquire these cards later. Then we need to take the quest cards again, called the tracking deck, and separate the level 3, level 2, and level 1 cards for themselves. Start by shuffling the level 3 cards. And place them face down. Then take the level 2 cards, again shuffle them, but this time place them face down on top of level 3. And then we do the same thing with the level 1 cards. Shuffle them and place them face down on top of level 2 and 3. There is one card that should not be shuffled into the tracking deck. This one is called the Hunter's Call, and this should be placed at the end of the road, with enough spaces to place 4 cards in between the tracking deck and the Hunter's Call card. Next to the gaming area for easy reach to all players, we also place the miniatures, their cards, dice, all of the tokens and the stamina cards that we might use soon, but also the big tiles that we will use to create the gaming area. So this game is, as you might understand, a game based on the TV game Horizon Zero Dawn. A game where you portray as a hunter moving out into the world to kill these big robot beasts. So we are in the future. The world have collapsed completely and has been overgrown, but these robot monsters are still roaming the planet. We have the Hunter Lodge that hire us to go out there and get these bastards down in the ground, but also to collect parts, to get things that we might need to be able to survive as a society again. And this is where you come in this game, because here you need to collect glory points, and you will use these glory points to become the best hunter and get the attention of the Hunter Lodge. The player at the end of the game that has the most glory points is the winner of the game in competitive mode, because you can play this in co-op mode but also in solo mode as well. If you play this in co-op or solo, the game and the setup is basically the same. The only difference is that when you get glory points, you use them to get cards back up into your hand instead of winning the game. And the game will be about you completing the missions instead of actually beating the other players. But I'm going to show you this game on how to actually play it, and the game is played up during 3 different phases. The first phase is the tracking phase. At the start of the tracking phase, the player with the leader tokens take the top 3 tracking cards. The player with the fledging token takes the top 3 event cards. But this is not done during the first round. The tracking phase represents the time where the hunters are tracking down their prey to see where they actually are. So this is where the leader who draw the tracking cards secretly chooses one of the available missions. Once they have chosen one, they take this and they place it in front of them. And the fledging, the one that chose the event cards, now does the same thing. Secretly chooses one of the event cards that they would like to play during this round. But again, this is only done from the second round and forward. Meaning that if this had been the first round, the fledging would not have done this. But let's say they do it. So they pick a card and reveal them at the same time. The player that have chosen the quest places that card on top of the event card. The cards that was not picked this round is discarded and not used during this game. These cards should be placed in a row next to the tracking deck. So this card was drawn during the first round with no event card beneath it, but from the second round we place the tracking card face up with the now drawn event card beneath it. The event card will give the last player in this round a big boost, because they can choose the benefit from these cards and either boost themselves or limit another player, depending on what the text says. But what do the track cards mean? If we look at this card, we can see a bunch of different symbols, but what do they mean? Well, in the top here, we can see which level this card is. This is a level 1. Level 2 and 3 would look like this. Up here we can see which of the big bosses we are tracking down to finish. This here is the Sawtooth. These here are the enemies that will appear on these tiles, because here you can see which tiles you should use during this round. Here we have 2A and 5A. The 2A here is the starting tile where the players will start. indicating by being a white circle around the letter and the number. Down in the corner you can see a square representing the number on the tile itself, meaning that this number here should be in the bottom right corner when placed out on the board. Here we can see which terrain should be placed out on the tiles, and over here we can see how many salvage cards each player will get if they are able to finish all of the enemies on this map. These numbers up here represents how many encounter points you need to have to complete this mission. If you are 1 to 2 players, you need 2 encounter points. If you are 3 to 4 players, you need 4 encounter points to complete this mission. You get encounter points by killing enemies. That was the tracking phase. The leader takes 3 of the top tracking card and chooses 1. The fledgling takes 3 of the event card and chooses 1. But again, this is only done from round number 2. Once we have done that, we know what we will encounter, and we also know what tiles we will see. Once we have done this, we move into phase number 2, and this is the encounter phase. Now it's time for us to take the tiles that we need and place them out on the boards along with the miniatures and the terrain. To set up the encounter area is quite simple. We look at the card to see how to place the tiles and where the little tile placement should be. So 2A should be placed out like this, with 2A down in the right corner, just like the tile here. And 5A the same way. Just be aware because these tiles are double-sided. So here we have the 3 to 4 player side, and here we have the 1 to 2 player side. We also need to make sure that the squares fit together just like the cards. And now we need to see what type of enemies we should put out on the playing field. As you can see here, we should have watchers on all of the squares saying A, and we should have the scrapper on all of the squares saying B. So I take the little watcher miniatures and I put them out on each square with an A. Then I take the scrapper miniatures and I put them out on each square with a B. But we also need to take a look to see if there's any other terrain. If you can see here, you have the square, and on all of the little squares you have a ruin. Meaning that you should take the ruins tokens looking like this with the ruin symbol and place on all of the squares that have a square symbol. Out on the different terrain boards we also have terrain like high grass. These terrains will help the players in different ways. The tall grass, for example, will help the hunters to stalk their prey. While a hunter is in the tall grass, they do not make non-alert enemies in adjacent squares alert at the beginning of the enemy's step. But if a hunter is hiding in the tall grass and one of the enemies moves into that square, the robot becomes alert. You do not place any tiles at the tall grass as they're already marked out on the tiles themselves. When an enemy attacks a hunter in the same square as a ruin marker, instead of making an evade roll, the player removes the ruin marker and ignores the attack completely. But there are also rocky terrain, where hunters can climb up to get a better view. If the hunter makes a range or melee attack at a rock, they get 1 more glory point. And either remove a component or kill the target. A hunter in the same square as a rocky outcrop always counts as the most recently activated hunter. But then we also have machine corpse. These represent dead old machines out on the field. A player can use one action to pick up 3 scrap cards when they're in a spot with this token. So now we have set up the gaming area and placed out the terrain tokens that were on the tracking card. Now the players need to start the encounter by placing out their miniature on the tile with the white circle. The hunter that has the leader token gets to go first, placing out their miniature in one of the outmost squares. Then the other players in clockwise order go on by placing their miniatures. If players want to, they can put several hunters in one square. Then each player shuffles their deck and picks up 5 cards, as this is their maximum hand size. Before we start the hunt, we also need to get the enemy's data cards, so we know what we're facing, but also their behavior card, so we know what they will do during their activation. But what do they mean? So this is the enemy's data card. Up here we can see which type of enemy it is, and over here we have a lot of other information. The first one with the 8 is this enemy's hit point, meaning how much life this enemy has. The second one down here is the shield, meaning that if you, for example, damage this enemy 4 times, 1 will go away because of the shield. This is the amount of scrap cards you will get for killing this enemy. This is the amount of glory points you will get for killing this enemy. And the last one down here is the encounter points you will get for killing this enemy. The last 2 ones down here, the A and B, are components that this enemy has on itself. Taking these out will give the hunters different benefits. For example, taking out A here will disable the A attacks that this enemy does, meaning this attack over here on the behavior card. If the enemy has any special rules, they are listed over here. And this here is what will determine what this enemy will do during its activation. But I will show you this one later. Now the hunt begins. We have set up the gaming area, we know what enemies we are meeting, we are prepared to get the encounter points we need to complete this mission. But we are still in the encounter phase. But now the hunters start to take their activation, starting with the leader, meaning that the leader will play out their actions and then the enemies will do their activation. Once that is done, we move on to the next player clockwise and keep on going until we either hopefully passes the mission or fail. But what can a player do during their turn? At the beginning of an activation, a player can discard cards from their hands, meaning that if they're not happy with whatever they have, they can discard it and pick up new ones. Just be careful not to do this too much, because these cards are your life. Once you get damaged and you can't discard anymore, or if your action deck runs out, well, you faint. So be careful not to do this too much. But once you're happy with whatever you have on your hand, we can move out on the board. During a player's turn, they get to do up to 2 actions, but they cannot do the same action twice. The first action a player could choose to do is to sprint. This will let the little character here move 2 steps on the board. And they can move horizontal, vertical, diagonal. They can even change direction in the middle of the move. It does not matter, it's all up to you. But when you sprint, you will alert enemies in adjacent squares that you pass by. And it makes sense, right? Because you're running, probably making noise, they will notice you. That's why there is another move action you can do as well. You can choose to sneak. Now you will only be able to move 1 square instead of 2, but you will not alert the enemies. A player can also choose to distract a non-alerted enemy within 2 squares from their hunter. They simply do this by choose a target square and a non-alert enemy, and then they move that enemy 1 square towards the target square. The hunters can of course also choose to attack the enemies, either by doing a ranged attack or a melee attack. And remember, you can't do 2 ranged attack or 2 melee attacks, you can only choose to do 1 of each. Meaning that you could do 1 ranged attack and then do 1 melee attack, but you can't do both during the same turn. But how do you actually do an attack? Well, to know that, we need to look at our cards. Well, if we for example look at the Force-Smith here, we can see that he has a Tripcaster on one arm and an Osram Maul on the other arm. This here is a melee weapon, and we can see that by looking in the down left corner, because this is the range of this weapon, and it needs to be used in the same square where his character is. This over here is actually a ranged weapon, meaning that he can use this one square away from the miniature. But down here we can also see the different types of die that the weapons use. This here will actually place out a trap, but this here will let you use 2 orange attack dice, meaning that the Force-Smith would place out this little token here on the map if he uses this weapon, or simply roll 2 dice if he uses this weapon. If we start by looking at the melee weapon here, for example, this means that he can use 2 dice to roll during his attack. Every one of these arrows is a hit. If you get a blank one, it is a miss. But if you get this one here, that is a critical hit. And we should look at the symbol next to the critical hit symbol on the weapons card. Here you can either get extra damage, or in this case, a condition. More exactly, a fire condition, meaning that the target he will hit would get a fire condition token. But there is also freeze and shock as well. All of the 3 will do different conditions to the target enemy. But we also have a symbol up here. This is the amount of modifications that this weapon can have. Modifications looks like this. And if you ever add a modification to a weapon, it should be slided in under the card so you can see the text below. This weapon here can have 1 modification, meaning that now it is full. But you can also make your weapons stronger. This one here, for example, the Maul, you could add the backswing to that weapon. And all of a sudden, instead of just rolling 2 dice, you get to roll 4 dice. You have the 2 regular, and now you have +2. And also, if you get a critical hit on this one, you get 1 more damage instead. So if, for example, the Force-Smith is on the same square as a Watcher, he could choose to use his melee weapon with the range 0 and roll 2 dice plus whatever card he have on it, adding 2 extra die. Once he have rolled the die, it's time for us to count how many hits he did. He got 2, 3, 4 hits and 1 critical hit. Down here we can see that we apply fire condition plus 1 more hit on the extra card, giving us a total of 4 plus 1 is 5 hits and fire damage. But we also need to check if this little enemy here has any armor. We do that by looking at their card, and we can see they have 1 armor. But they only have 4 life. And since we did 5 damage, this one here is dead. Meaning that now we get to pick up the corresponding scrap cards, which is 1. This player that kills it get 1 glory point. And we also get 1 encounter point as a group. That is how you use a melee weapon, but also a ranged weapon. You make sure that you are within range, and then you simply add up the dice that you have on your cards, withdraw the armor that the enemy has, and hopefully you have made a hit. But the traps are a bit different, because here you put out a trap token instead. And you put this out on a square that is within reach of your trap card. Meaning that the Force-Smith here, for example, had a range of 1. So he can only put this out on a square that is within that range. Once an enemy moves into that square, the trap will trigger. And then the process is kind of the same again. You roll the dice that says on the cards, and if you manage to kill the beast, well, you get the rewards stated on the card. Some hunters might have several traps out on the board, which is why it's good for you to put 1 token on the board and put a matching one on your card in front of you, so you know which trap corresponds with which card that you have in front of you. Some of the enemies also have components, remember, and you can choose to attack the components, but you can't do that if you use a trap. But if you use a ranged weapon or a melee attack, you can attack the components themselves. And if you make half the damage of one component, you have damaged it, meaning that the next time you make half the damage, it is completely destroyed. But if you exceed the tier value of the component will break immediately. If you do attack a component on an enemy, for example this one here, you place out this little token to remind you that you have destroyed a part of the component. If you destroy the component completely, you put it with the red side up, indicating that now component A is completely destroyed. Some weapons have an area of effect symbol on them, meaning that this weapon here will actually hit enemies around the target. So if, for example, this is the target enemy, this enemy here would also get hit. We would need to roll the amount of dice stating to the right of the area of effect symbol. If there would be several enemies within the area of attack, we would roll for each enemy separate. If you damage an enemy but do not kill it, you put out these damage token indicating that you have done damage to them. So you can keep a track on how much damage you have left. If you damage an enemy but do not kill them, they will become alert. Meaning that you need to put an alert token on those enemies. Looking like that. The enemies can become alert in several different ways. If an already alert enemy walks into a non-alert enemy, that enemy also becomes alert. If a non-alert enemy stands in the same or an adjacent square to an enemy that's being attacked, that one would also become alert. If a hunter would make a sprint next to an enemy, it would become alert. But if we simply sneak into an adjacent square, it does not become alert. Lastly, an enemy also becomes alert if a hunter is in the same square as the enemy at the start of the enemy's activation, or if they are in an adjacent square to that enemy. But if they would be in the tall grass, they would not become alert, as they are hiding in the tall grass. The last action a player can choose to do is to craft. Now they can spend one action to take the bottom 3 cards from their discard pile and shuffle them back into their action draw pile. And this is the only action the players actually can do twice, meaning that you could spend both of your actions to take the bottom 6 cards instead and shuffle them into your action deck. And this might be a good idea to do every now and then, because remember that when this runs out, you have fainted. So every now and then when this pile gets too low and this gets too high, you will need to craft a bit. So now the hunter have done their activation and they feel more or less happy about it. And it's time for us to activate the enemies. We are still in the encounter phase, but now we move from the hunter's activation to the enemy's activation. And we start by activating the alerted enemies. More exactly, the alerted enemies that are closest to a hunter. When we activate an enemy, we need to look at their behavior data card. Here we can see that we have a question. Is the hunter within 1 square? Yes. Then we need to choose this route here. If it's no, then we need to choose this route right here. As you can see, some of these squares has a little blue pattern around them, meaning that they are conditional. The ones that are just pure see-through, they are mandatory. So if we take no here, for example, we can see that this scrapper here would do an attack. The top number, number 2, is the range of this attack. The bottom number is the damage it would do. And as we can see here, this is an attack where the scrapper uses the component A. So if this component is destroyed, this attack will not happen. After this is resolved, we move down and simply move 2 steps towards the closest hunter. When you are instructed to move the enemy towards the hunter, you move it to the closest one, meaning that this one here, for example, would move into the same square as this hunter here and then stop. If it says instead it should move to the closest non-alert enemy, well, it simply moves to the closest non-alert enemy instead. It's really not that hard. And in the rulebook, it's also stated out exactly what they mean. These enemies here can be in the same square as other enemies or stand with the hunter, but we do have huge enemies as well. As you might understand, these are so big that they cannot be in another square with another enemy. They're just too big. And if you're instructed to move these into a square where there's already an enemy, well, these big boys here, they simply come to a stop instead. Man, look at this one. And if, or when, you are attacked by an enemy, it works out the same way, but the enemy does not roll any dice. You simply take the number stated on their data card, but remember that you have armor, and you should roll the amount of die that says on your armor, so you have a chance to remove some of the damage. In this case here, for example, I got 3, meaning that if this enemy here hits 6, I would only take 3 damage. Some of the enemies, like the Sawtooth here or the Shellwalker, have several data behavior cards, meaning that when you activate them, you simply draw a card, turn it face up, and see what it says. Once you have emptied it, you shuffle it real quick, and then you start over again. So you really never know what you're facing here. So that was the alert enemies. But what about the non-alert enemies? Well, these ones here simply move one step, following their little track that you can see here on the map. If they ever move off the map, they are gone and out of this hunt, simply indicating that the hunters took too long time to get that enemy. That was the encounter phase, and now we move into the maintenance phase. The first thing we need to do in the maintenance phase is to check if or how many times our hunters have fainted. Remember I told you that once you run out of action cards and you can't discard any more cards, your character will faint, and we will need to put them on the side. If we have fainted the same or more times than we are hunters out on the map, well, we need to forfeit. We are simply too tired and we can't keep on hunting anymore. So even if we have not completed our mission, we simply have to stop and go back to the campsite. But if we have not fainted that many times, we need to check if we have enough encounter points. Remember I told you that you get a certain amount of encounter points for each enemy you defeat. Well, now it's time for you to calculate to see if you have enough. We do that by looking at the mission card. We can see here that we are 3 to 4 players, so we need at least 4 points to complete this mission. If we have the amount of encounter points that we need to complete this mission, we could just call it the night right now and end this round, go into the campfire phase. But we could also stay and hunt the rest of the enemies if we want to. We might get more things, we might be able to salvage more, we might be able to get more glory points, and this is where the players need to agree. Either we keep on fighting in the encounter phase and go another round here, or we say, you know what, we're happy, we have made it, and we move into the campfire phase. So now we are back at camp. We have cleared the board for the maps and we have returned our little miniatures to our playing area. If we had lost the last mission, we would skip the campfire phase and go directly to the merchant. But we were victorious, so now we need to see who was the best hunter. And we do this by counting glory points. These are the points that you get from killing the enemies, remember? Now, this is a 3-player game, meaning that the player that have the most glory points would get a full sun token, but also get the leader token. The player that comes second would get the half full token, and the player that comes last only gets the fledging token. And this is different depending on how many players you are. Because if you're a 2-player game, well then one player gets the fledging token and the other player gets the full sun token instead. But if this had been a 4-player game, then the winner would get the blazing sun token, the second place would get full sun, third place half sun, and fourth place only get the fledging token. The way these works is of course to keep track on who is the best player at the end of the game by indicating that they have won the most. But we're not done in the campfire phase just yet, because now we need to look at our mission card, because we might have a chance to level up our character. If we have completed a mission that had a higher level than what we are currently at with our character, we get the opportunity to level up on our trait track. If you did complete a mission that was higher than your level, you get to move this little token down and choose one of the 3 alternatives. Here it says you can add 2 intuition cards, and here you could add 1 trait. I choose to take the add 2 intuition, meaning I get these 2 cards to my action deck. When you go up in level here on your little trait track, you also get to have more cards on your hand. You start with a max capacity of 16 cards, but as you move up you can have 18, 20 and lastly 22. And if you do not want to fill up your card deck with, for example, traits like I did here, you could also choose to take stamina cards. These won't give you any special ability or anything like that, but they will give you more life. That was step 2 of the campfire phase, but we still have the last step left. And this is the merchant step, where you have the chance to hopefully use your scrap cards to get some better equipment. There are 3 different level merchants in this game, and depending on what level encounter you have just completed, you get to go to that same level merchant. From this deck we should draw 2 armor cards, 1 weapon card, 2 ammo cards, 2 modification cards, and 1 Michelangelo's card. When you draw these cards, you go from the top to the bottom, and if there's ever too much of one item, you simply discard it and keep on drawing until you get the amount you need. Now, each player will have a chance to do this, so it's not like the market is empty once somebody has bought. No, one player draws the cards from the merchant and then see if they have the money to buy anything, or if they can even have it on their hand. Because you have a hand limit, remember? So if you already have the amount of cards you can have on your hands, well, you can't do anything here. So have that in mind when you choose to go up on the track there. But if you can still fit cards on your hand, you can look on the different cards that you have just drawn and see if you have enough resources to buy that card. Because up in the top right corner, you can see what type of resources you need. This one here, for example, needs 1 metal shard. But these ones over here needs, for example, 1 metal shard, but also 1 chill water. So it all depends on what you want and how much resources you have. You can always discard the special items to get 1 metal shard. For example, discarding these 2 would give you 2 metal shards, or discard 2 metal shards to get 1 of the special ones. When the campfire phase is over, we simply go back to phase number 1 and then we go through the game again. This is how the game moves on until we have drawn all the mission cards and that deck is done. Then we need to flip over the last card, the one we put out in the start, remember? The Hunter's Call. And now the big bad boss comes out. The player that has the fleeting token still takes an event card and puts under this one. But other than that, we simply go into the encounter. Hopefully, we manage to take out this boss. Whoever gets to take out the boss first gets a full sun. If we do not manage to complete this mission, well, we collectively lose the game. But if we do manage to kill this beast, it's time for us to count some scores. This is done pretty easy. A blazing sun is worth 3 points. A full sun is worth 2 points. A half sun is worth 1 point. Whoever has the most points is the winner. It's that simple. And in a co-op game, well, we're just happy that we made all the missions together. Same thing in a solo game. If you complete all the missions, well, you should be happy because it's not that easy. That's how you play Horizon Zero Dawn, the board game. It might seem like a lot, but once you have gone a few rounds, you really get the hang of it. But there is a lot of things here you just keep in the back of your head. You have the equipment, you have the different abilities, you have the enemy cards, and you have the movement out on the board as well. So there is a few things for you to actually just try to keep in mind. But like I said, it becomes second nature once you have just gone a few rounds. Now, did I enjoy this game? Yes, I did. But then again, I love this game from the start. I love the PlayStation games, I love the artwork, I love the theme itself, and I love the little miniatures, and the gameplay works quite good. What I did not enjoy that much about this game is that it's quite hard for you to build your hero. You do not have that many occasions when you can get new equipment, and it kind of felt like when I had the perfect hunter that the game ended and I never really got to use the equipment that I really would like to use. The missions in this game are actually quite hard. I mean, they start out quite easy, but eventually when you move up to the level 3 missions, they get quite hard, and you really need to make sure that you have received the right equipment to go out there and take care of these enemies. Now, the missions themselves are actually quite fun to do, but I just feel like there could have been more in the missions. There could have been, for example, let's go out there and gather this material because the hunter's logs acquires it. Or maybe a rescue mission or something, just to break off the missions a little bit and make it a little bit more versatile. But other than that, man, the game is good. If you like miniatures, if you like to go out in kind of this environment, not dungeon crawler, because this is not a dungeon crawler, this is you hunting these robots and trying to get points. And I think the game works well in both solo, co-op, and competitive as well. I've played them all, and I gotta say, I think it works the same in all 3 modes. Of course, there's a different feelings when you're out competing against the other players, because you feel like you really need to get that kill to be able to get the points in the end of the game. When you play co-op or solo, you of course have a different tempo, and you do not feel that stressed about the whole situation. So it's really what you're out for. But if you like this type of games, I think you should check it out. And also, if you're not wanting a big campaign, I mean, this is great. This is a one-off game. You put it up on the table, and when you're done with it, you can just put it down and let it rest until next time. The artwork of the characters and the equipment, the board, the miniatures looks really well made. And it's just high quality all the way. It has this authentic feeling to the games that we have played on the PlayStation, but it also really does a good job out on the board itself. Really makes you feel like you are in the wasteland, simply trying to survive and fighting these beasts roaming the lands. The miniatures in this game is absolutely stunning. These 2 big ones here are from the expansion, the Thunder Jaw and the Stormbird, but the small ones that are from the actual, just the basic board game here, are absolutely epic as well. They're so detailed, they're so beautiful, there's so much love gone into making these, and me being a big fan of the TV games, I see the resemblance a lot in the miniatures. I mean, these are not half-assed done. There's been a lot of hours sculpturing these epic minis. The rulebook of this game is quite well written. I don't think I've ever read a rulebook like this before. It didn't feel like reading rules at all. It felt like I was reading a magazine, really. Because you have the text here and it takes you through the little story. It takes you through what the different things means. It takes you through what the characters can do and how they look and how they can interact with the environment, the equipment. And like I said, it's like reading a magazine. It's not really like reading a rule. So this is quite well made. And I mean, yeah, it's quite thick and there's no scenarios, there's no campaigns in here. It's on 51 pages. But like I told you, I think reading this book was probably the first rule book I have ever just sat down and read without taking multiple of pauses in between. there you have it, my friends. That was Horizon Zero Dawn, the board game. An epic, beautifully made miniature game where you go out to kill these monsters roaming the lands. I hope that you enjoyed this video because I enjoyed making it and I enjoy playing this game a lot. It's definitely a game that I will have in my collection for a long time. But like I told you, this game is right up my alley. It's sci-fi, it's monsters, it's miniatures, it's rolling die, it's getting equipment. I really, really love these type of games, so it's no wonder that I like this. Plus, things like this from the expansion just makes the game, I mean, like 1,000 times better, right? But that's just me. I love things like that. Yes, I am nerdy in that way as well. If you enjoyed this video, people, please give me a thumbs up. Please comment. Please subscribe to the video. And if you want to know more about this game, there will be links down in the description. So check that out as well if you like to. But most important, until next time, people, please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace.